He thought she was just the janitor. She thought he'd forget her the moment the game ended. But after losing to her in front of Boston's elite Nathan Carter billionaire's son and chess prodigy, couldn't get her out of his head. Who was Emily Brooks? How did she beat him like she'd studied his soul? What began as a humiliating loss turns into an obsession, a search and a connection that neither of them saw coming. But the real twist, it wasn't just about chess, it was about everything he never knew he was missing. Keep watching. The final move will change everything. It was a crisp Thursday evening in Boston, and the Black Oak Chess Club glowed like a cathedral of intellect behind its arched stained glass windows. Inside, soft jazz played under the chandeliers and the air smelled of cedarwood and aged whiskey. This was no place for casual passers-by. Membership was exclusive. Conversations were laced with Latin and the game of chess sacred. Among the elite judges, professors, and startup moguls, one name ruled above all: Nathan Carter. At 27, Nathan was more than just the club's 8-time champion. He was the son of tech billionaire Ethan Carter, an MIT prodigy, and the man everyone loved to hate but never dared to challenge. With perfectly parted hair, a custom-fitted Navy suit, and a watch worth more than most members' yearly salary, Nathan played with an arrogance that was earned. His matches were swift, merciless, and surgical. Opponents walked in with pride and walked out with existential dread. That night, Nathan had just humiliated a corporate attorney in 18 moves when something completely foreign disturbed the air. The front doors creaked open, heads turned. Silence rippled through the room as Emily Brooks pushed a battered janitor's cart across the polished marble floor. Her uniform was faded. Her white sneakers were scuffed. A few strands of her brown hair escaped from a messy ponytail. She looked tired. Not disheveled, just real. She didn't belong there, and she knew it. She wasn't supposed to enter the club until after midnight to clean. Yet here she was, quiet, calm, walking past the reception desk, past the murmuring tables until she paused in front of Nathan's board. He looked up from his tumbler of bourbon, one eyebrow slightly raised. "Are you lost?" asked Vivian, the club's receptionist, her tone sharp. Emily didn't answer. She just stared at the chessboard. Her eyes scanned the pieces, not like a stranger to the game, but like someone reading a language she once knew by heart. Nathan leaned back in his chair, curious. "You play?" he asked, loud enough for half the room to hear. Emily blinked slowly, then nodded. "I used to." A few chuckles bubbled from the sidelines. Nathan smirked. "Care for a game?" "Just for fun." Emily glanced at her watch. "I've got 20 minutes before the floor's dry." The laughter grew louder. Nathan gestured toward the empty seat. "Let's see what you got." She sat down. Not hesitantly, not nervously, but with quiet precision. She reset the board, her fingers moving as if she'd done it 1,000 times. Nathan offered her the white pieces. She shook her head. "Black's fine." He raised an eyebrow. "Ballsy." The game began. At first, Nathan toyed with her, setting up familiar traps, moving with the same confident rhythm he'd perfected over the years. But by the 5th move, the air shifted. She wasn't reacting. She was guiding. Every response she made disrupted his tempo. His traps evaporated. His rhythm shattered. She moved not just with knowledge but with memory, as if she'd played this exact game before. By move 10, Nathan was sweating. By move 15, the room was quiet. By move 26, his king was cornered. Checkmate. Nathan stared at the board. The pieces blurred. He hadn't just lost, he'd been outclassed. By a janitor. Emily stood calmly, nodded at him, and began resetting the board. "Thank you for the game, Mr. Carter," she said, voice steady. "I need to get back to work." She turned, pushed her cart down the marble corridor, and disappeared into the shadows. The room stayed silent. Nathan didn't move. His brain raced. Who was she? That wasn't beginner's luck. That was mastery. But her name wasn't on any tournament list. She wasn't a member. She wasn't even supposed to be there. Who the hell was that someone whispered? Nathan didn't answer. He walked slowly to the bar and poured himself another drink. His hand trembled slightly. It wasn't just the loss. It was how she'd beaten him. Cold, clean, no drama. Just a girl with bleach stains on her sleeves, who played like she could see the board 5 moves ahead of him. He pulled out his phone and tried to find her. No results, no records, no social media under that name linked to chess. She had just vanished. But one thing was clear. He had to find her again. Not just to get revenge on the board, but because something in her, something behind those calm eyes rattled him. And for the first time in years, Nathan Carter felt like the one being studied. Nathan woke the next morning with a ringing in his skull that had nothing to do with the bourbon he had swallowed after the loss. He opened his laptop and pulled up every New England tournament result from the last 10 years. No Emily Brooks in sight. He checked U.S. chess ratings, college club rosters, even middle school scholastic archives. Nothing. Either she had played under another name, or she had disappeared long before digital records mattered. The absence felt intentional, as though she had buried herself on purpose. Nathan told himself the search was about pride. Yet every time her calm eyes flashed in his mind, he felt something less tidy, a curiosity that burned hotter than embarrassment. 3 evenings later, a drizzle swept through Beacon Hill, turning the brick sidewalks slick and black. Nathan sat in the club library surrounded by dusty opening manuals, but he couldn't concentrate. Each new page reminded him of the one player whose style no book could prepare him for. At 9, he finally gave up, closed his laptop, grabbed his coat, and stepped out into the rain without an umbrella. He walked aimlessly, cutting across Boston Common, the wet wind lifting the collar of his suit. Near Tremont Street, he heard the faint clack of wooden pieces. It came from a shallow stone alcove where 2 homeless men often sheltered, but tonight a small crowd huddled under the archway. He edged closer. Emily was there, not in a uniform, but a faded green jacket too thin for the weather. She sat cross-legged on a milk crate facing an older veteran with a beard and trembling hands. The board rested on an upside-down bucket, pieces chipped and mismatched. Yet Emily treated them as if they were carved ebony and ivory. She spoke softly, explaining why the man's pawn push opened a fatal diagonal, then suggested an alternative. The veteran nodded, grateful. Nathan realized she wasn't beating him. She was teaching him to survive. Rainwater dripped from Nathan's cuffs as he stepped forward. At first, he meant to introduce himself, but the veteran saw him and grinned. "You're the rich kid she wiped out, aren't you?" The small crowd laughed good-natured. Nathan managed a smile. Emily looked up surprised but not flustered. 20 minutes isn't a lifetime, she said, echoing their first conversation. The veteran surrendered his crate so they could play. Nathan sat opposite her on a broken park bench. No spectators here understood how colossal his reputation was inside Black Oak. They just saw 2 young adults under a leaking arch. Yet Nathan felt more exposed than in any tournament hall. He tried a hyper-modern opening, something sharp, but Emily steered the game into quiet waters, exchanging queens early. Without tactical fireworks, he had no shadows to hide in, and after 40 moves, he offered a draw. She accepted without gloating and set the pieces back. They played again. By the 3rd game, the rain had stopped and the crowd dwindled until only the streetlights watched. Emily closed the board, tucked it under her arm, and nodded to the veteran before walking off toward Charles Street. Nathan followed, pacing beside her in silence until she spoke. "You're soaked. I was reading about you," he said, then corrected himself. "Trying to. You won't find much." "Why?" She shrugged. "I left the circuit at 15. My mom got sick. Hospitals don't pay for themselves. So you just quit. If I'd kept traveling for tournaments, my little sister would have landed in foster care. Not a hard choice." She said it as if explaining bus schedules. They reached a narrow doorway marked Trinity Housing. Emily keyed in a code. "I coach at a community center on Saturdays. If you want a rematch, come there, not the club." The door clicked shut. Nathan stood alone, raincoat clinging to his shoulders, feeling smaller than he had since boyhood. The next morning, he postponed 2 investor meetings and visited the Trinity Housing office. A social worker confirmed Emily volunteered there twice a week, teaching kids for free. Nathan offered a sizable donation, which earned polite thanks but no personal information. Leaving, he noticed a bulletin board with a flyer, "Saturday Youth Chess, Coach Emily." Address: an old recreation hall in Chelsea, a neighborhood his driver usually sped through without stopping. Saturday arrived with bright October sun. Nathan parked his Tesla next to a cracked basketball court and carried his tournament set inside. The gym smelled of chalk dust and floor wax. Folding tables lined one wall each with a battered board and plastic pieces. Children between 7 and 13 bounced in their seats while Emily demonstrated a tactic on a whiteboard. Her eyes lit up when the smallest girl solved the puzzle before anyone else. Emily clapped genuine, and the room beamed with her. Nathan waited until the session ended. Kids dispersed in noisy swirls. Parents thanked Emily, and gradually only they remained. She wiped the board clean. "You came. You beat me once and drew twice," he said. "I need data. Data games. To study your style." He unfolded his wooden board. Best of 5. They played until the custodian dimmed the lights. Emily won 2. Nathan won with 2 draws. More important than the score were the silences between moves, the quick glances when they reached for the same piece, the way she laughed when he tried a ridiculous pawn break just to see her reaction. At 9, the custodian locked up. Nathan offered to drive her home. She refused but let him walk her to the bus stop. While they waited, a gust of wind yanked her jacket collar. Nathan shrugged off his wool overcoat and draped it over her shoulders. For a heartbeat, she looked as if she might hand it back, but then she pulled it tighter. "You'll freeze," she said. "I'll survive." He hesitated. "Why Chelsea? You could coach anywhere. Kids here don't get many free chances. Someone gave me one once." Her bus arrived. She slid out of the coat, folded it, and pressed it into his hands before stepping aboard. The doors hissed shut. Through the window, she offered a small wave, then disappeared into the night. Nathan didn't sleep. He replayed every conversation, every gesture. He recalled how her fingers lingered on the rook when she sacrificed it, bold, selfless. The next day, he called his father's philanthropic director and arranged a grant to renovate the recreation hall. He insisted the funds remain anonymous, afraid Emily might reject help if she sends charity. A week later, Black Oak hosted its annual invitational. Nathan usually triumphed easily, but that night he lost in the semifinals to a Latvian grandmaster. Spectators were stunned. Nathan hardly cared. While applause echoed, he typed a message he had rewritten 10 times. "Coffee, no chess clocks, just conversation." He erased it and typed again, hitting send before courage failed. Emily's reply came an hour later, tomorrow 10 a.m., Longfellow Cafe, Cambridge. "If you're late, I leave." He wasn't late. They talked over burnt espresso about everything except chess, her mother's dialysis schedule, his guilt over wealth he didn't earn, her dream of studying data science once her sister graduated high school, his secret fear that without the board he had no real identity. Conversation stretched past noon. At 1, Nathan checked his watch. "I've got to run to a meeting this afternoon, but I want to help." He braced for her resistance. "A real coaching position, salary, health benefits? I have contacts at the Boston Youth Initiative." She studied him, measuring sincerity against pity. "I won't be anyone's project." "It's not charity," he said. "It's self-interest. If you have stability, you'll keep kicking my ass at chess. That motivates me." A smile tugged her mouth. "You really think flattery works? I'm improvising." She considered, then wrote a number on his napkin. "Call this woman. She runs the nonprofit. If she says the job's legit, we'll talk." She stood, tossed her cup, and left him staring at a 7-digit phone number that suddenly felt like the most valuable move on the board. That evening, Nathan implemented phase 2 of his planned transparency. He met with the nonprofit director, outlined funding, and insisted Emily be consulted on program design. No backdoor gifts, no hidden strings. 2 days later, Emily texted, "You kept your word. I start next month. Also, your Benko Gambit is trash. See you Saturday." Nathan laughed out loud in the middle of a board meeting, startling a row of executives. He realized he didn't care about their raised eyebrows. All week he replayed the text, especially the part she hadn't written, but he could feel trust. Late Friday, he locked the chess room at Black Oak and stared at the empty table where he had first seen her. The polished surface reflected his face, but for the first time in years, he couldn't tell if he looked victorious or terrified. He remembered her saying someone once gave her a chance. He wondered if that someone could be him now, or whether she was the one giving him the chance to become a version of himself he'd never imagined. He closed the lights, stepped into the night air, and felt it something shifting, inexorable, as decisive as a pawn, reaching the 8th rank. Would you risk your comfort zone if the person who challenged you most might also be the one who saves you? Emily's first official day as program director of the Boston Youth Initiative's chess outreach began in a sunlit gym that smelled of wood polish and possibility. She arrived an hour early, setting out donated boards and labeling them with the kids' names. When Nathan walked in carrying 2 industrial coffee urns, she pretended not to notice the way his tie was knotted a little crooked, as if he had rushed to impress no one but her. By 10 dozens of new students had filed in, Emily opened with a story about a castle that sacrifices a tower to protect a lone pawn. Every child leaned forward, caught between fairy tale and strategy, and Nathan realized he was watching her do the things she was born for. The weeks that followed moved like a speed chess clock, fast, precise, no wasted seconds. Enrollment tripled, and local news stations ran a feature on the program. One afternoon, a reporter asked Emily if she would ever return to competitive play. She laughed it off on camera, but Nathan saw a flicker of something ambition she had learned to hide. That evening, he sent an email to the Massachusetts Open Committee, quietly paying her entrance fee and leaving the confirmation in her staff inbox. She showed up at his office the next morning with the printed receipt. "You had no right. I have every right to believe in you," he said. "Decline if you want, but don't tell me you don't miss the board." Emily stared at the window behind him, Boston Harbor shimmering in winter light. "I don't have time to train. You say that as if I won't rearrange my entire life to make sure you do." He handed her a ring-bound notebook labeled Project Endgame. Inside was a month's worth of study schedules, sparring partners, and slots he had cleared in his own calendar. She flipped through it, pages trembling, and found his final note. "If you win, I'll never mention this again. If you lose, I'll still be in the front row." Emily accepted the challenge, but set one condition: Nathan had to enter 2, side by side, student and student, rather than coach and prodigy. He agreed before doubt could surface. They trained at dawn in Harvard Square cafes and at midnight on park benches where their breath hung like ghosts between sentences. Sometimes he beat her, more often she destroyed him, but each game left them laughing at mistakes and marveling at each other's risks. Tournament day arrived in a converted hotel ballroom filled with the clatter of clocks and the restless shuffling of pieces. Nathan's first-round opponent resigned quickly. Emily's match drew a small crowd, her style sharp as glass. By the semifinals, they stood on adjacent boards. Nathan pushed past personal bests, yet fell to a cool-headed international master. Stepping back, he realized all disappointment had vanished the moment he saw Emily leading her game into the kind of endgame that used to keep him awake at night. 43 moves and her opponent tipped his king and offered a handshake. Cameras flashed. Nathan's chest tightened, not with envy, but with a pride so fierce it felt like belonging. That night at the awards banquet, she held the state champion's crystal trophy, while donors mingled around imported cheese platters. She caught Nathan's gaze across the room. In her eyes, he read the truth. Trophies were fine, but they were not the point. She crossed the floor, ignored the governor's outstretched hand, and whispered to Nathan, "I spent years thinking sacrifice meant shrinking. You showed me it can also mean growing." He answered by sliding his fingers through hers, as natural as a rook sliding down an open file, and asked if she wanted to leave early for a walk by the river. They strolled to Charles under strings of fairy lights left over from a fall festival. Nathan confessed he had never cared about victory as much as people thought. He had just been good at it. Emily confessed she had never allowed herself to imagine a life that was both brilliant and safe. When the wind rose off the water, she pressed her head against his shoulder, and he realized it was the first time she had rested instead of carrying someone else's weight. He told her he loved her. Not urgently, not like a gambit, but like an endgame that would last as long as they were willing to keep playing. She answered with a quiet yes, so soft he felt it more than heard it, and the game of their lives finally came to equilibrium. Now it's your move. Did this story checkmate your heart, or did you see the twist coming from the first pawn push? If you loved it, type 100 in the comments to let us know. Tell us which country you're watching from and share the video, so more people can discover how a single game can rewrite every rule. Sorry to refer search.